I am Emma Collins, 32, and the day my mother-in-law called me trash is etched in my mind like a scar I can't forget. It wasn't a quiet insult whispered behind closed doors. It was thrown at me like a weapon, loud and clear, during what was supposed to be a family dinner. The room fell silent, everyone frozen as those two cruel words sliced through me. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor and never come up for air. But I stayed, forced to endure the humiliation while the people who were supposed to care looked away or pretended nothing had happened. For years, I had tried to fit into their perfect picture, to be the daughter-in-law who was polite, quiet, and invisible. But that night, the truth was exposed in the harshest way. She didn't just dislike me. She despised me, and she wasn't afraid to say it. The sting of her words lingered long after the dinner ended, infecting every conversation and every glance thereafter. I was trash in her eyes, and somehow, in the eyes of everyone who didn't speak up, that label started to feel like a reality. But beneath the hurt, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to live in her shadow anymore. I wasn't going to let her define who I was or how I saw myself. That night, alone in my room, I made a promise. I would rise above her venom, above the judgment, and I would prove my worth on my own terms. I began to dream of a place that was mine, where I could breathe, where I could be free from her poisonous influence. The pool house in our backyard had always been neglected, a forgotten relic gathering dust and weeds. I saw potential there. I envisioned transforming that rundown space into a sanctuary, a symbol of my strength and independence. While my husband remained caught in the middle, trying to keep peace between his mother and me, I poured my energy into renovating the pool house. Every brushstroke, every nail hammered was a small act of defiance against the label she'd placed on me. It became my refuge, a physical space where I reclaimed my dignity bit by bit. Then, life threw her a curveball. Her own home situation spiraled out of control, leaving her desperate for a place to stay. When she came to me, pride swallowed, humbling apologies on her lips, I saw my chance. But I wasn't the scared girl from years ago. This time, the offer came with conditions. I would let her live in the pool house, but only if she agreed to my rules, to respect me and to acknowledge that I was no longer someone to be dismissed. Watching her beg to live in a space I created was a victory I never expected to savor. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming power, rewriting our story, and showing that no insult, no cruelty could keep me down forever. For months after that night, the air between us was thick with unspoken tension. My mother-in-law moved into the pool house, but it was clear she wasn't used to living on someone else's terms. She arrived with a suitcase full of grudges and a mouth full of biting remarks, but I kept my cool. I knew this wasn't just about where she lived. It was about who controlled the narrative now, and I wasn't about to give her the upper hand. Every morning, I'd walk past the glass doors that looked out onto the pool house, reminding myself that this place was my victory. The same walls that once echoed with neglect now reflected my determination and resilience. I set clear rules from day one: no drama, no insults, and respect was non-negotiable. She scoffed at first, clearly expecting me to back down or crumble under her disdain, but I stood firm. The more she pushed, the more I reminded her who called the shots now. Living so close forced us into confrontations I could no longer avoid. One afternoon, she stormed out of the pool house and demanded answers. Why had I turned the tables on her? Why had I built a life she couldn't break? I told her the truth. I wasn't the same woman she tried to crush. I was stronger because I refused to let her words define me. It wasn't easy watching the woman who once wielded power over me struggle to accept her new reality, but it was necessary. I wasn't just fighting for respect. I was fighting for my peace. The days turned into weeks, and slowly I saw cracks in her armor. The sharp edges softened, replaced with moments of grudging respect. She began to engage in small conversations instead of cold silences. She stopped sneering when I walked by and even, once or twice, offered a genuine smile. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was progress. Meanwhile, my husband was caught off guard by the shift. The woman who had always been his mother's loyal champion was now living under my roof, playing by my rules. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the tug between loyalty to his mother and admiration for the woman I was becoming. I didn't need his approval, but I welcomed the quiet nods of support that came when he saw me standing tall. This wasn't just about a pool house anymore. It was about reclaiming my voice in a family that had tried to silence me. And every day I reminded myself, this time, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The more I built my life around the pool house, the more I realized how much I had lost trying to keep the peace. Years of walking on eggshells, swallowing insults, and pretending everything was fine had drained me. But the renovation wasn't just about the space. It was about reclaiming myself piece by piece. I threw myself into the project like it was therapy. Late night sanding, painting, and decorating became moments where I could breathe without judgment. I picked out every detail carefully. Warm lighting, soft fabrics, calming colors. It was my sanctuary, a place where the word trash couldn't touch me. Meanwhile, the tension with my mother-in-law simmered just beneath the surface. I kept my distance, letting her stew in her frustration while I focused on what mattered. Me. I stopped trying to win her approval or change her mind. Instead, I changed the only thing I could: how I saw myself. Friends noticed the shift in me. I smiled more, walked taller, and carried myself like someone who had finally taken back control. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't defined by her words or the judgment of anyone else. And then, life threw me a curveball. When my mother-in-law's own problems left her homeless, I faced a choice. I could turn her away and hold on to my victory, or I could use this moment to finally rewrite the story. Not just for me, but for both of us. I chose the latter, but on my terms. The pool house was a wreck when I first started. The paint was peeling, the floorboards creaked, and the air smelled stale, like forgotten memories trapped in dust. Most people would have seen a lost cause, but I saw potential. A blank canvas where I could rebuild not just a space, but a part of myself. I spent weeks planning every detail. From sleek modern furniture to soft ambient lighting, I wanted the pool house to feel like a 5-star retreat. A place where I could escape judgment, silence the noise, and just be me. It was more than renovation. It was reclaiming my power. Every hammer strike, every brush stroke, felt like a small victory against the years of insults and coldness I'd endured. My husband helped where he could, though he mostly stayed neutral, wary of taking sides. I didn't blame him. The tension with his mother had pulled him in too many directions. Neighbors started to notice the transformation. The once neglected pool house now gleamed like a jewel beside our backyard. It became a symbol, not just of renewal, but of my refusal to be broken by anyone's cruelty. I kept the project a secret from my mother-in-law, letting the progress surprise her when the time came. Inside, I imagined her face when she saw the new space, a reminder that I was no longer the woman she dismissed, that I had carved out a place of my own, built on strength and self-respect. The pool house was more than a building. It was my sanctuary, my triumph, and soon it would be the stage where the tables finally turned. The moment I realized my mother-in-law's pride would be her undoing came when her world started to unravel. Rumors circulated about financial troubles and family disputes that left her without a stable place to live. It wasn't something I gloated over. Far from it. But the timing made me realize an opportunity was quietly unfolding. I decided to set a trap, not out of malice, but to regain the respect and dignity I'd been denied for so long. I reached out subtly, offering help in a way that put me firmly in control. It wasn't charity. It was a proposition. When she finally called, voice shaky and pride barely held in check, I laid out my terms. She could stay in the pool house, yes, but only if she agreed to live by my rules. No insults, no disrespect, and an honest acknowledgement that things had to change between us. It was a gamble. I knew she'd never ask for help outright. She was too proud, too stubborn. but desperation can change even the hardest hearts, and I waited patiently for her to swallow her pride. When she finally showed up on my doorstep, suitcase in hand, I saw the hesitation in her eyes, the silent begging for a second chance, a lifeline she never expected to need. And in that moment, I knew the game had changed. She wasn't just begging for shelter. She was begging for a place in a story where I held the pen. She arrived one rainy afternoon, suitcase in hand, eyes downcast but full of silent challenge. The proud woman who once spat the word trash at me was now standing on my doorstep, asking for shelter in the very place I had rebuilt to reclaim my peace. I didn't rush to open the door. Instead, I let the moment linger, letting her feel the weight of the role reversal. When I finally stepped outside and let her in, I made it clear. This was no charity. The pool house was my sanctuary, and she was here on my terms. The rules were simple but firm. Respect me, respect this space, and leave behind the bitterness that had poisoned our relationship for years. At first, she resisted, clinging to old habits of disdain and veiled insults. But the confines of the pool house, the boundaries I set, and the knowledge that her options were limited forced her to change her tune. Slowly, grudgingly, she began to adapt, realizing that this new chapter required humility and compromise. Living so close brought daily challenges, but also unexpected opportunities for understanding. I saw cracks in her tough exterior, moments of vulnerability she rarely let slip in front of others. For the first time, I glimpsed the woman behind the harsh words, the fears, regrets, and insecurities that had fueled her cruelty. Though the path ahead was rocky, I held on to the hope that this unusual arrangement might be the start of something different, something better. For both of us. Living so close to her was like walking a tightrope every single day. The pool house wasn't just a physical space anymore. It became a battleground of wills and unspoken grudges. Some mornings I'd catch her watching me through the window with a look that mixed resentment and something like awe. Other times, the silence between us was thick enough to choke on. She wasn't used to being on my terms. The woman who once wielded her words like weapons was now forced into quiet reflection, unable to lash out the way she used to. I kept reminding myself to stay patient, to hold the line without giving her the satisfaction of seeing me break. There were moments, small, almost accidental, where our walls cracked. A shared cup of coffee on a chilly morning, a reluctant smile over a well-timed joke. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was something neither of us expected. The beginning of a fragile truce. I knew this was about more than just pride or power. It was about two women, tangled in years of pain and misunderstanding, trying to find a way to coexist without tearing each other apart. Every day was a test, but I was determined to pass. Not just for me, but for the future I wanted to build beyond her shadow. The shift in power wasn't immediate, but it was undeniable. Living in the pool house under my rules meant she had to face a reality where I was no longer the timid daughter-in-law she could dismiss. I watched as her posture changed, from defensive and rigid to hesitant and uncertain. The space that once symbolized my retreat was now her new reality, and with it came an unexpected respect. I started setting boundaries firmly, not out of cruelty but necessity. No more snide remarks or cold shoulders, no more undermining my place in the family. When she slipped, I called her out calmly but decisively. At first, she bristled, but the lines were clear, and she learned quickly that the old games wouldn't work here. Her grudging acceptance wasn't victory, but it was progress. I saw her trying, awkwardly at times, to navigate this new dynamic. The woman who once held power with harsh words now hesitated before speaking, choosing her words with care. It was a quiet revolution, a slow dismantling of the toxic patterns that had defined our relationship. Every day I reminded myself that this wasn't about winning or losing. It was about reclaiming my peace and showing her that respect was a two-way street. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was not just surviving but taking control of my life. And in doing so, reshaping the family I had once felt trapped in. The private conversations between us were some of the hardest moments to face. Away from the eyes of family and friends, the tension that had built over years spilled out in raw, unfiltered words. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by me. Yet there we were, two women forced to confront the wounds that had festered beneath the surface for far too long. I made it clear that her insults weren't just hurtful. They were unacceptable. I demanded honesty, not excuses. She pushed back at first, trying to justify her bitterness and resentment, blaming years of misunderstandings and old grievances. But I held my ground, refusing to let the narrative twist into anything but the truth. Slowly, the walls came down. She began to share pieces of her own struggles, the fears and insecurities that had fueled her harshness. I listened, not with the intent to forgive right away, but to understand. For the first time, we saw each other not as enemies, but as flawed women caught in a complicated web of family drama. Those conversations didn't erase the past overnight, but they planted the seeds of change. And for the first time, I believed that maybe, just maybe, there was a path towards something better. Establishing boundaries wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I knew that if I wanted to protect myself and finally claim the respect I deserved, I had to be firm and consistent. No more letting her insults slide or pretending everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. The pool house was my domain, and I would not allow it to become a battleground for old wounds. I started by setting simple, clear rules: no disrespect, no drama, and a commitment to civility. At first, she resisted, testing my limits with sly comments and cold stares. But each time, I calmly reminded her where the line was. No shouting, no name-calling, no belittling. My calm, unwavering stance took her by surprise. She wasn't used to being met with strength and resolve instead of fear or submission. As days passed, those boundaries began to reshape the way we interacted. The sharp edges of our encounters softened, replaced by a wary respect. She started to think twice before speaking, and I found space to rebuild my confidence. No longer shrinking to avoid conflict, but standing tall within my own space. These boundaries didn't just protect me. They forced both of us to confront the reality that our relationship had to change if it was going to survive. And slowly, that change began. Small victories felt monumental when your past was full of pain. I remember the first time she genuinely smiled at me. Not out of obligation, but something softer, almost shy. It was over a shared cup of tea in the pool house kitchen, a quiet moment that spoke volumes. That tiny flicker of warmth was like sunlight breaking through years of storm clouds. She started helping with little things around the house, bringing me coffee in the morning, asking about my day without the usual edge of sarcasm. It wasn't a complete transformation, far from it, but it was progress. Each small act chipped away at the bitterness, revealing glimpses of the woman beneath the harsh exterior. I began to sense a shift in her attitude, subtle but unmistakable. The walls she'd built around herself were cracking, just enough for me to see hope peeking through. I didn't expect friendship overnight. I only wanted respect and a chance to heal the wounds we both carried. Those moments, small, fragile, and often fleeting, reminded me why I had fought so hard to claim my space. This wasn't just about winning against her. It was about reclaiming my peace and maybe, one day, building a family where kindness wasn't just a word, but a reality. The family noticed the change before anyone dared to say it out loud. My husband caught on first, his eyes softening when he saw me stand taller, no longer shrinking beneath his mother's sharp tongue. His silence turned into quiet support. Little gestures that said, "I see you. I'm with you." It wasn't a grand declaration, but it mattered more than words. Extended family gatherings became a different kind of battlefield. The undercurrents of tension were still there, but my mother-in-law's icy demeanor had thawed enough that others began to treat me with a newfound respect. Whispers replaced snide remarks. Hesitant smiles edged out dismissive glances. I saw it in the way my husband's relatives paused before speaking, reconsidering their words. I caught their surprised looks when I stood my ground calmly during conversations that once would have left me silenced. The shift wasn't just about me. It was about the message I was sending. I belonged, and I wouldn't be pushed aside. For the first time, I felt like a true member of the family. Not because I changed who I was, but because I refused to let their judgments define me. It was a quiet victory, but one that echoed loudly in every gathering that followed. One afternoon, I caught wind that my mother-in-law was quietly trying to undermine me again, whispering to relatives, casting doubt on my intentions, and stirring old tensions. It was a test, a final attempt to regain control and remind me of my so-called place in the family. But this time, I was ready. Instead of reacting with anger or desperation like I might have in the past, I faced her calmly and confidently. I addressed the situation head-on during a family gathering, refusing to let her subtle sabotage go unchecked. I spoke clearly and firmly, laying out the truth without drama or accusations, just facts. Her surprise was palpable. The room fell silent as everyone turned to watch the woman who had been dismissed for so long finally stand her ground. I could see her falter for the first time, realizing that her old tactics no longer worked. That moment wasn't just about defending myself. It was about drawing a line in the sand. I was no longer the easy target or the quiet victim. I was a force to be reckoned with, and I made sure everyone knew it. That night, after a tense family dinner, my mother-in-law and I found ourselves alone in the quiet of the pool house. The walls that once held only resentment now felt like a fragile bridge between us. She looked tired, older, maybe even humbled, and I realized we both carried wounds deeper than words had ever admitted. For the first time, she spoke without venom. She confessed her fears, her insecurities, and the pressure she'd felt living up to impossible expectations. I shared my pain too. The loneliness of feeling unseen and unvalued in a family I wanted so desperately to belong to. The conversation wasn't easy. There were tears, silence, and awkward pauses. But beneath it all, something shifted. A mutual understanding that neither of us wanted to be enemies forever. We weren't there yet, but the walls between us had cracked wide enough to let the possibility of healing in. It was the beginning of something new, fragile and uncertain, but real. And for the first time in years, I dared to hope that our story might be rewritten, not as a tale of bitterness, but one of unexpected grace. Reclaiming my power wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic showdowns. It was the quiet strength I carried every day. I stopped shrinking to fit into the expectations of a family that never truly accepted me. Instead, I stood tall, owning my worth and refusing to apologize for being who I am. Living with my mother-in-law in the pool house taught me that respect isn't given lightly. It's earned through boundaries, patience, and unwavering confidence. Each day I grew stronger, not just in the way I carried myself, but in how I allowed myself to be seen. I stopped waiting for validation from others and started celebrating my own victories, no matter how small. Whether it was a kind word from my husband, a nod from a relative, or simply the peace I found in my sanctuary, I knew I was finally living life on my terms. This wasn't just about surviving a toxic relationship. It was about thriving beyond it. I reclaimed my voice, my space, and my family, not by breaking others down, but by rising up. And in doing so, I discovered a power that no insult or betrayal could ever take away. Living on my own terms has been the most liberating journey of my life. The pool house, once just a project, became a symbol of my resilience and growth, a place where I found peace away from the chaos and cruelty that once defined my family life. I learned that standing up for myself didn't mean burning bridges. It meant building stronger foundations. My relationship with my mother-in-law is far from perfect, but it's changed. There's a tentative respect now, a quiet understanding born from honesty and boundaries. More importantly, I found my voice and refused to let anyone silence it again. I discovered that true strength isn't about controlling others. It's about controlling how you respond, how you carry yourself, and how you protect your peace. As I sit by the pool, watching the sunlight dance on the water, I realize I'm not just surviving. I'm thriving. I'm living proof that no matter how low someone tries to put you, you have the power to rise, reclaim your life, and create a future defined by your own terms.